Hello everyone, welcome back to GGN. This is part 2 for this news report today. It's Wednesday, December 5th, 2012. I'm Darko, and my website is ggnonline.com, and on YouTube it's ddarko2012 and ddarko2013. So we left off with this article right here, Insourcing Boom, after we were just talking about the CFR and how they were talking about making a case for U.S. multinational. They're talking about corporations and how globalization was so great and everything, and the propaganda that Americans were under, basically being told that big business has always been a big part of American life, and that the super rich and these family bankers want no role for democracy, yet they'll keep basically saying that they do. But it's really what? Privatization, or privatizing the profits and socializing the losses. And I guess, I haven't really thought too much about capitalism, and I'm not going to be a big basher of it, but I'm starting to kind of think about it more from a different perspective and what it really means and how it degrades people, and how inevitably they just suck people dry, like they've sucked countries dry and small businesses until there's nothing left. But these huge corporations that are basically more powerful than countries. So it says here that the piece touches on a number of complex interrelated issues. However, you want to scoff at the Orwellian language that's used to describe the crushing of labor unions and everything else, as the bottom line appears to be that GE and other companies are bringing manufacturing jobs back to the United States with all of the caveats, ifs, ands, and buts you want to throw at it. And when the asshole Immelt of GE talks about running a charity, that's interesting. Indeed, I don't know of any charities that have such an extensive laundry list of violations and fines listed in the Federal Contractor Misconduct Database. Now, interesting too, this Immelt was actually on Obama's recovery team, economic recovery team, back in 2008, 2009. So, just basically leaving off, you can check out the actual article, it's down there. I mean, it's going to be pure propaganda. They're talking about how they're bringing it back home, right? Sounds great and everything, because they care about Americans, right? Now they want to exploit you, like I said. You're a human resource, or human capital, basically to be thrown away when they're done using you. And the great thing, too, is the whole thing with the Civil War, it was about slavery, but it was about what? Going from a physical slavery to a financial slavery, to a wage slave, to a tax slave, to a debt slave. And I hate to say this, but it may have actually been better to be a physical slave, because at least you knew that you were a slave. There was no qualms about it. You didn't tell your children that, hey, you're free, right? No, you're not free. So, but one of the things just someone mentioned to me recently was that is an interesting point. Even slaves back then, they got what? They were still fed. They were still housed. A lot of their amenities were taken care of by their, quote, slave owners. Whereas now, you just get fired and you get let go when they start downsizing. U.S. manufacturing shrinks to 3-year low. It's plunged to its lowest level in 3 years as demand for U.S.-made products also decreased in overseas markets for November. They attributed the slowdown to a decrease in demand for factory orders and manufacturing jobs, less investment in equipment. Also, alright, so just like usual when I try to do these miscellaneous videos, especially with global government and eugenics and social engineering, I get attacked, and that's what I just did. I got attacked, and my computer, literally my monitor just went black. It's again, every time I get attacked, it's always some new tactic, something new that I learn and experience, and this one was my monitor just went off, black. I'm like, what the hell? My computer was still on. But eventually, I realized that it actually shut down and it was restarting. And then I got a blue screen of death. Tried a bunch of times, didn't work. Either way, just pretty interesting stuff there. Nice little, crafty little attack there. So thanks to the douchebag who did it. You're a very brave person hiding behind wherever you're hiding. And speaking of conspiracies and cowards who carry them out, German man locked up over this HVB bank allegations may have been telling the truth the whole time. He was put in a psych unit for claiming his wife was involved in a money laundering at the Bavarian bank, but 7 years on evidence has emerged that could set him free. So, yeah, I mean, the big banks, of course, HSBC, Wells Fargo, and then they've been caught many times laundering the drug cartel money as well. That's how they get their money flowing through this global financial system. The reason the whole war on drugs thing is just basically it's a war on competition. They don't like competition. So that's why when they say free markets, it really doesn't mean fair markets. It means free markets to exploit people, especially in other countries. Greece seen as EU's most corrupt country. I thought this was kind of funny how they're going to beat up on Greece after it's very well known what happened to them with Goldman Sachs and their role in Greece. It says here, for a second time in 2 years, the U.S. investment bank Goldman Sachs has an image problem, says comments last week by former executive director on the bank's toxic culture wiped out more than $2 billion off its value the following day. However, in early 2010, Goldman Sachs stood accused of worse when the bank was revealed as one of the architects of the emerging Greek disaster. Not only was it blamed for helping conceal the true state of the country's finances, but it was accused of eventually betting against its sovereign debt along with other major banks. That's right. That's how they made a lot of money, by actually betting against stuff that they were investing in at the same time. But of course, when you go down here and it tells you the ones that were the best countries or least corrupt: Denmark, Finland, New Zealand. New Zealand, they have a nice monopoly on the internet or their telecommunications over there. And, of course, North Korea is dogged as being the most corrupt, along with Afghanistan. It says lawless Somalia as well, right? The United States, the pillar of ethics and morality, came in 19th, just behind Japan and Britain, which were ranked equal at 17th. China was well below the 50-point mark, coming to 80th with a final score 39, with Russia 133rd place. Of course, Germany and France were up there at 13th and 22nd, so completely skewed. BS. Goldman Sachs robbed the EU by way of Greece. So this is another way of putting it. A brief explanation. It says membership in the EU comes at a price. It says that that price is a limit on deficits. This aspect of the EU treaty was meant to ensure the solvency of member nations and so support the euro currency itself. But no member can unilaterally revalue its currency as is by treaty. It goes on and says this severely limits the unilateral options for dealing with sovereign debt by member countries, which in turn opened up unusual opportunities. This is the main thing. Opened up unusual opportunities for member countries to be exploited by international banking such as Goldman Sachs. Goldman wins again, and European Union Court rules to keep the European Central Bank involvement in Greek debt, fudging a secret. So I covered this already. It says here, Greece used derivatives to hide its debt. And why? Well, it's simple. Recall that it was the Goldman Sachs who was the primary advisor on a decade worth of these swaps-related deals, allowing Greece to outright lie about its fiscal deficit and its total debt levels. Yeah, it's interesting too. Remember, it's just absurd, this whole thing about the most corrupt countries. I mean, what about the most corrupt corporations like Goldman Sachs that still keep moving and moving and moving? In fact, I think they actually got an ex-Goldman Sachs into the head of the European Central Bank. Of course, the EU also got a Nobel Peace Prize. So, but moving on here, EU rewards Goldman Sachs for Greek debt scheme. This article from November 13th of this year: Greece needs another 80 billion euros, says Goldman Sachs. Well, I bet they do. Last year, the biggest word of the year for 2011 was austerity. This year, it's capitalism and socialism. They attribute it to the election and healthcare debate. But like I mentioned earlier, I think it's people are starting to question what type of system we're actually living under. And I saw this article. It's actually a video of... I didn't know it was going to be Gordon Brown until I heard his voice. It was playing accidentally in the background, and I knew exactly who it was. And then I was like, okay, what article is this being matched to? And then it was this: the enslaved children freed after being forced to make Christmas decorations. And this individual is a globalist. He's an evil scumsucker, just like all the other ones there in the U.S., Britain, and all these globalists that are pushing these policies. And they know exactly what they're doing, exploiting workers. Exploiting countries when they're down after they've been taken advantage of, like we're talking about with Greece and Goldman Sachs. And they love this system of Walmart and cheap goods. I mean, almost all of these global corporations are guilty of using child labor, but they like to call it free trade. It's not really all that free. It's completely regulated and dominated by these globalists and these moneylenders who don't have any ties to any nation or anything. But then they like to play that for the people, for the citizens, when they want to around election time and when they want to get a war started. They bust out the nationalistic rhetoric. United States youth jobless rate hits a 50-year record high. It says here that, according to a report, more than 6 million teens and young adults aged 16 to 24 in the U.S. are neither in school nor working, reaching a new record high since the 1950s. That just reminds me, in that video, in this short part, he says, he goes, and this is a terrible thing because they're supposed to be in school, right? They're supposed to be getting brainwashed about how basically free they are and how great capitalism is and globalism and how they have to fight for climate change. But it's a big indicator. I mean, it really is, because it's in America, it's and probably in other places where their economies have been kind of gutted out, and technology is rolling in, taking over these people's jobs and stuff like that. Teen jobs are jobs like kind of crappy retail jobs that usually are a dime a dozen. Well, they're not there anymore. So it's not just people in my age group that are in their 30s that have college degrees and stuff like that are struggling to find work because people don't want to retire. All these people that are supposed to retire, these baby boomers are not, because they can't, because they got, well, their futures and their pensions and all that got raided. So they got to keep working, and then all the jobs that would normally be vacant because people come and go, they're holding on to them. That's what I said before. People are holding on to these Dollar General jobs like there's no tomorrow, AutoZone and that. Future generations have to deal with the financial carnage. It says during off-hour Sunday, where few people were willing to ruin whatever remained of their weekend. It says here that the National Association of Insurance Commissioners approved new rules that would allow life insurance companies to lower the reserves for future claims. It says the Glass-Steagall Act, after decades of being reinterpreted and watered down and finally gutted by Citibank's foray into investment banking and insurance, was repealed in '99. The business of finance boomed, banks ballooned, Wall Street printed paper profits, and bonuses skyrocketed. Less than a decade later, the financial takeover, what they call a crisis, laid waste to the world economy. So they say here, a professor from IU, future generations of executives, regulators, and consumers will have to deal with the financial carnage that was done. And we got a little bit of a typo here, county instead of country. U.S. is only developed country where younger generation will receive less education than their parents. So the expectation of young Americans will always be better educated and more successful than their parents is no longer true. A new report from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development says the U.S. is now the only major economy in the world where the younger generation will not surpass the preceding generation in terms of schooling. It says today only 20% of young adults will reach a higher level of education than their parents, a rate that's among the lowest rates in the developed world. Changes to 11 plus to stop middle-class parents buying access to selective schools by hiring tutors for their children. They say, one of this education chiefs says he fears the use of home tutors gives an unfair advantage to the middle classes. Pretty interesting. So the middle class who don't want to send their kids to these complete re-education camps, I'm not saying that they're not getting brainwashed at the private institutions that, preach organized spirituality, religion, whatever. They are better schools, though. And the middle class who do fork over a little bit more money to send them are saying that's not fair. The children of the middle class parents who can afford to pay for private tuition have an unfair advantage. The 11 plus in the UK is designed to test pupils or students' innate ability, but research has shown that almost 30% of parents across the country hire a home tutor for their child. Remember this article I covered back in October, the New World Order Education, Useful Engines in the One World Schoolhouse. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation seeks to introduce and control a one-size-fits-all worldwide school curriculum. The strategy aptly fits alongside historically persistent schemes to further restructure education en route to an internationally based technocratic order. It says here that a overwhelmingly popular toddler's animation Thomas the Tank Engine captures the modus operandi and consequence of American public education over the past century. Like the child subjected to years of compulsory schooling, Thomas is an entity devoid of meaningful social agency and reduced to demonstrating his overall worth by being useful in Hat's enterprise. It's interesting. When we're talking about employee, you're an employee. It means it's referred to like employing a tool. So you're a tool. Also, you're being put to use. That's what employee means. To put to use your time. Energy. And Thomas behaves for his overseer, knowing that his life has been largely planned. His intellectual and creative faculties reduced to an instrumental motivation to stay on track.